Welcome to the Viking Age podcast. It's the official podcast of thevikingage.com. My name is Chris Shad. I write for Fansided and Zone Coverage, and we do this right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel. We're also in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. But however you consume us, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. If you're looking on the YouTube version of the show, you can see him on the screen. We got a special guest for today's show. He's written basically everywhere during his career: the Sporting News, Pro Football Weekly, Yahoo Sports, and now he covers the draft for NFL.com. His name is Eric Edholm. Welcome back to the show, Eric. How you doing?
Another fine introduction, my friend. Yeah, doing well. It's a little bit of a downtime after the draft craziness and everything, so get to kind of sit back, relax, reset, gather my thoughts, and hopefully lay out some wisdom today.
So I want to go through, I mean, you're a draft writer, obviously. So I want to talk about this Vikings draft class, and let's just dive into it right now. Everybody at this time of the year, they want grades, right? Everybody, there's I think there's a site out there that does like a report card, right? Where it's like all the grades and they give a GPA and that kind of stuff. I'm not going to ask you for that. The Vikings had 5 picks in this draft: Donovan Jackson, Tai Felton, I'm going to butcher the name here, but Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, Kobe King, and Gavin Bartholomew. What is your 10,000 foot view of this class?
Yeah, I mean, obviously coming in, we knew they had pretty limited resources. I think they may have had technically, at least by, depending on which draft point chart you use, probably the least amount of draft capital of any team, or right close to the bottom. So I really thought that trading out of 24 was going to be the plan. I expected them to move down a few spots, and it sounds like they talked to the Giants on the clock, which is kind of interesting. And you can't quite tell from the Giants video that they posted, but it sounds like they offered the Texans the same thing in the next pick that they offered the Vikings, or pretty darn close. So kind of interesting that they turned that deal down, because it was pretty hefty haul, nice, future picks, and turn that down to take Donovan Jackson, who, look, I mean, I think what it told me was that they didn't feel like there would be a commensurately talented offensive lineman if they slid back into round 2 at that spot. He may have gone to the next pick. The Texans trading out might have suggested that they were, kind of interested in him as well. So, it says that they really believed in Jackson as an instant contributor, or if nothing else, a future starter. And I thought they did okay with their picks. We'll see with Tai Felton. He's got to have us kind of a specific fit, but I thought overall, they did pretty well, considering they had not too many cards coming into the draft.
Yeah, and I'm kind of looking at the deal here the Giants wound up sending. So they gave Houston, or actually it wasn't Houston. It was, who was it? Oh, yeah, it was Houston. 2025 second round pick, the 34th overall. Third round selection, which was the 99th pick, in a 2026 third rounder to Houston. That was to trade up for Jackson Dart. I'm just kind of looking at the picks right now and seeing where they would have been. I mean, Houston took Jaden Higgins at 34, but if we're looking at offensive linemen, you have Jonah. Again, this is going to be
Savaiinaea. Yeah.
Thank you, Savaiinaea. And then, you kind of look a little further down there, and I mean, the next offensive lineman that was taken was Ariante Ursary, an offensive tackle out of Minnesota, with the 48th overall pick. With Donovan Jackson, this guy sounds like somebody the Vikings really wanted, and you kind of talked about it a little bit. It's almost like the final Infinity Stone in Kevin O'Connell's Infinity Gauntlet, because they got embarrassed in the playoffs. He's like, we got to do something about the interior. They signed Ryan Kelly. They signed Will Fries. Now they draft Donovan Jackson. Some people thought it was a reach. Were you one of those people who thought the Vikings maybe should have took that trade? And I mean, I don't think he was, I'll say this right now. I don't think he was going to be available, because I think Houston really needed an offensive lineman and they were going to take him. But did you think that was not, as they say, value for the pick?
Yeah, and I apologize if you hear my dog in the background. Someone just rang the doorbell, so maybe he was really upset with the pick. I don't know. But,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think he was like the 6th offensive lineman to go off the board in round 1 off the top of my head. It may be, it's close to that, but there had been a little run, and to your point, had they moved back to 34, you either take the Arizona kid who's a guard in some teams, tackle in some teams, which is the same with Donovan Jackson for different reasons. They're different players, but yeah, the pickings were pretty slim, right? All of a sudden, you just kind of looked at the reason why teams thought that the O-line and D-line would go quickly in round 1 is because with the O-line, there were some talents, but it dropped off. With the D-line, it felt like those were some of the more blue chip talents in this entire draft. So, those positions went pretty quickly, and they were still able to dip into both. And, with Jackson, I think probably around mid-season, had you asked me where's he going to go in the draft, I probably would have said somewhere on day 2, probably a guard. But him stepping in for Josh Simmons, I think really kind of changed the outlook for him. I think people realize he has a little more length than you realize. He's got good mirror skills and can react to quick pass rushers. And he's got a little force in his play too. I mean, the thing about Simmons that people complained about, he's a little too finesse at times. And, I feel like there was almost, I don't want to say a stark difference, but there was maybe a noticeable one when he got in the lineup, just a little bit more power at that position too. So that flexibility, him able to display a little bit wider range of skills. I think by the playoff run, it was becoming clear this guy's a top 40 pick. I don't know if it's late first or early second, but he's going somewhere pretty soon. And that only sort of became more solidified when we went throughout the process. I didn't think he'd go much earlier than that, but I don't think he would have lasted much longer either. So, depending on how you look at value, if they really wanted to address that position and really wanted him, I don't think this was some colossal reach or anything.
And I mean, like I kind of mentioned, it was the final piece of this offensive line rebuild.
Right.
You have Christian Darrisaw, Brian O'Neill at the other tackle spot. You have the guards in the center in place. How good do you think this offensive line can be for the Vikings next year?
It could be a top 10 unit. I mean, again, you have to still see the pieces come together, and you have a brand new quarterback, obviously, which is, he kind of throws a wrench into the operation because, look, a quarterback can make an offensive line look bad inadvertently. So clearly they struggle without Darrisaw last year. You could see it even by getting Cam. I mean, it just felt like the pass rush was becoming way too overwhelming for them to handle. And there was only so much that, that KOC could do with this play calling and still be an explosive offense. So I think overall with the guys they added, who you mentioned earlier, I would say it's a net positive over what they have, assuming that Darrisaw's back and healthy and, he's good to go start of the year and everything. So, and then again, maybe the change of quarterback is a good thing. I mean, maybe JJ ends up getting rid of the ball a little quicker than Sam did. I mean, Sam was known for holding on to the football and waiting for stuff to open up and taking risks and occasionally taking sacks that probably were more on him than the blockers. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's at least in the middle of the pack and has the potential to be in that kind of upper third of the league, I would say, as far as offensive line rankings go.
Kind of looking down the offense, the offensive line, obviously one area the Vikings needed to upgrade. Receiver was a sneaky need, and they go ahead and they take Maryland's Tai Felton in the 3rd round. A bit of a burner, played at Maryland where Keenan McCardle has some ties. Jeremy Fowler mentioned that he was a hand-picked player by McCardle and the Vikings regime. Some people are looking at him like a gadget type player. Do you think he can be more than that, or what can he be for the Vikings?
Yeah, I think to start, he was an interesting player for me. You could see him kind of make clear steps in each year of his development. And the speed obviously translated sometimes more on the short stuff where they would just throw him quick hitches and ask him to create than it was on the downfield targets. At least the games that I watched to him, it was a little bit frustrating at times. They couldn't really, I mean, they got the ball to him a lot, but they weren't able to get him the ball in those explosive situations as much. That's why you saw kind of the yards per catch fall off a little bit last year. They were so intent on him being a big part of their offense. Now, he had some drop passes. He had some fumbles in his career. That's something to keep an eye on. Small hands, kind of a lean build guy. I think you're right. I mean, you can draw some stuff up for him. I think he is a neat sort of, trick play guy. And obviously at this stage with Justin Jefferson and Addison and even, Naylor, and I think they brought in Rondale Moore as well. And, it's not like you're asking this third round pick can be an instant contributor, or it could be kind of a redshirt type player. The good news with him is that in addition to having kind of that quick burst ability where you don't have to, where you can kind of scheme up a touch in the backfield and ask him to gain some yards. He also has special teams experience, and you saw him as a gunner and playing out on the coverage units. And that's really, I think, where his speed should translate immediately. And it's always nice to have a player you can use on game days and more than just a couple of hand pick touches or whatever. So I would imagine, fourth or fifth receiver year one, unless he just blows people away with his yak ability. But at the very least, a player that would head into year two with some real promise.
And I did mention receiver as kind of a sneaky need for the Vikings. You don't think of it because they have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Addison likely looking at a suspension for that DUI last July. Not sure when that's going to come down, but Jalen Naylor stepped into that third role. It was kind of a mixed bag for him where he produced some big plays, but sometimes, he didn't do a lot after the catch.
Yep.
I think that's the one point where Felton could be really good. I mean, Rondale Moore, you mentioned him. He's dealing with his injury still. He might not be ready to go until training camp. So Felton's going to get all of those reps. He could have an opportunity to step in as that second receiver as soon as week one for a couple of weeks until Addison gets out from the suspension. I'm not sure about the player, but I like the pick in general because, you look at the receiver market. Cooper Kupp got what, $12 million on the open market? Like these receivers that are getting released, you look at them and you go, oh, he would be a perfect fit. And you have to pay this insane amount of money to get them. I would just, if I were an NFL GM, I would just take a receiver every year, at some point in the draft. And if he doesn't pan out, he doesn't pan out, but you get one more weapon each year in case of injury, in case of anything. And I think that's really just been a theme of the Vikings roster in general.
Yeah, and I think that idea of drafting players at positions that you're constantly have to churn through. There's a lot of them playing at once, whether it's a secondary, receiver, offensive line, even running backs to a certain degree. Teams are using more multiple tight ends. So that's why you see teams double and triple up at that spot and everything. But also, like to your point, the financial aspect of it. Now, you may not get the immediate returns or professionalism that a Cooper Kupp would bring to a team, but you get the next 4 years to evaluate him if you so choose. And, most third rounders typically get at least a couple seasons, that's sort of the, barring something unusual. But yeah, I mean, I think you're right about that too. He could step into an early role. I'd kind of forgotten about Moore's injury, to be honest, and Addison's legal stuff, but yeah, I mean, I think it, like you said, it was kind of a sneaky need, and given how sparse the free agent market was as far as top guys, and given how this wasn't considered an exceptional receiver draft, I think Felton was like my 109th or 10th player overall. I can't remember exactly where, somewhere around there, and they got him at 102. So I think the value is pretty good. I mean, that's about where I expected him to go off, late third, early fourth. So that wasn't shocking. And yeah, I mean, speed translates. So that's also a big help.
Well, we're going to talk about the day 3 picks in just 1 minute here, but we got to get paid here on the podcast. And our listeners want to get paid too, because do you want to win up to 1,000 times your money? Of course you do. And you can do it at Underdog Fantasy. To play, just choose whether a player will go higher or lower on their stats, such as points, assists, rebounds, and more. They've got all of your favorite leagues, teams, and stars to choose from. I've been playing Underdog for years, and this is one of the most exciting times of the year for me. You got the NBA playoffs still rolling. The NHL playoffs are into their semifinals as well. And MLB season is in full swing right now. And if I got a quiet night going, and I have a lot of them living in Brookings right now, I just make a couple of entries and I can play with as little as $1. You can do it too. All you got to do is download the Underdog app, sign up with the promo code The Age, which is all one word. You see it at the bottom of the screen, and you unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Join in on the fun when you sign up with the promo code The Age. Once again, all one word, and you can claim your special offer today and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly upon your first deposit. You must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama or Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. If you are concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, call 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT STEP to 53342. And in New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. You know, are you a baseball guy, Eric?
I grew up a big baseball fan. I don't follow the sport quite as much these days, but I think I can usually catch most baseball references. So,
you know, like during the game when they would say like that underwriting and like they would all like joke, just be like, you know, this game cannot be disseminated by the thing of Major League Baseball
consent, right?
Yeah. And like they would always laugh at it, like, oh yeah, that's super hard to read. I get it now. When I do the Underdog read, I'm like stumbling. I'm like, oh, don't mess up. And like a lot of times I do, but that one was smooth. I'm feeling pretty good about myself. So
like, don't be hard on yourself. I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. Yeah.
An award-winning read by me. But let's move on. Hopefully some of these day 3 picks can get some awards of their own for the Minnesota Vikings. Georgia defensive lineman, again, I'm going to butcher. Is it Tyrion?
Yeah.
Tyrion Ingram Dawkins in the 5th round. The thing that raised my radar was that Brian Flores seems really excited about him and his versatility. And he was not a starter for the Bulldogs, but he was one of those kind of rotational guys, like your Milton Williams type, who plays like 500, 600 snaps. They mix in and they, you know, get after the quarterback. What does he bring to the table for this Minnesota Vikings defense?
Yeah. And, you know, at a school like that, I mean, you know, Georgia has as many, you know, talented defensive linemen as I think any team in the country, are right up there anyway. And so, you know, what I've done a few shows where people have asked about, you know, like the Georgia lineman who only had this many sacks or this many starts. And, you know, I always preface it by saying, you know, they rotate so much at D-line, linebacker, secondary. I mean, they do it everywhere because they've got this massive roster of talented players. So now I will say that Ingram's Dawkins was kind of a late bloomer. I mean, they felt like he was always in the rotation, but never more than a bit player until last season. So, you know, the production wasn't great in college, but there was enough disruption this past season, enough flexibility in his game. And, you know, a lot of his plays were in the backfield. A high percentage of his plays were big plays. I think that's what stood out on the tape. So, you know, still a guy who's only 22 and hasn't played a ton of college football compared to some of his other D-line guys. And, you know, and maybe in a typical D-line draft, he's drafted a round earlier. This just happened to be an exceptionally deep group. So I do think there were enough people who mentioned him throughout the process to make me think, okay, there's a healthy amount of respect. I mean, I remember going through the Georgia players with one of the scouting coordinators and basically him saying, like, you know, this is one of the guys that'll be real popular on day 3. And he's got good size. I mean, you know, like I think Brian Flores wants those big defensive linemen who are bigger ends, I should say, who can kick down and rush from the interior if they're capable of doing that. You obviously saw some of the athletic traits that really kind of popped off, the 4.8 40, and you know, the vertical and broad jumps were terrific for a guy 20, 30, 40 pounds lighter. So, you know, the movement skills in some of the testing drills really backed up what a lot of people felt, which is that this is a guy who can, you know, grow into something. Another, you know, I would say, you know, like Felton, you have to be a little patient. The talent's there, but it's going to take a little bit of mining and probably in a rotation. I'm trying to remember. There was something off the field that happened with him. I don't think it was considered a major issue. So there's maybe a little immaturity in the past, but he was well liked at Georgia for the most part, from what I understand, and enters the mix as a possible rotation guy early on.
And I think too, one of the things that I like about the defensive line right now, I did kind of want them to take Derek Harmon in the first round. He wasn't available because he goes to Pittsburgh. And I think Walter Nolan went super early. Not Mason Graham, the other Kenneth Grant. I keep getting him mixed up, but Kenneth Grant went super early too. So like by the time the Vikings were picking, there wasn't really a defensive tackle on the board. But what they did was, I think they have quality depth along the defensive line right now. You have Harrison Phillips, who's been really solid for them. You add Jonathan Allen, you add Javon Hargrave, and then some of the guys that stood out last year, it wasn't a lot, but I really liked what Jalen Redmond did at the end of the season. And now he's a guy who's a depth guy. You're not relying on him to be a force. If you kind of, again, people talk about the Baker Mayfield deal and all that stuff when it comes to the Milton Williams role, right? You go in, you play 400 snaps, you make an impact, and you earn a big paycheck. Like, that's what Jalen Redmond can do now that the Vikings have this depth. And I think it's one of the biggest things that they've accomplished this offseason, and nobody is talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, in that odd front too, I think he's a good fit too. I mean, it makes sense. You could probably play him as a 4 or 5 technique. I think that's the most likely role. But I think what you said is having those veterans out in front. Allen's a really, it's one of those additions that hasn't probably been talked about outside of Minnesota a lot this offseason. So that's an interesting one. Hargrave too is somebody who obviously, is used to being in a rotation now. Obviously, since being paid, it's been a little different, but he'll certainly help, and they don't mind going a little smaller, at the nose, knowing that Phillips is so good at what he does. And so I'll be curious to see how they kind of mix and match those guys. I didn't get a chance to watch a lot of Redmond last year, but obviously from what I've read, it seems to back up what you said. So, now you're talking about 5 guys. I think Rodriguez has played a little bit too. So, I mean, maybe 6 that have that, that kind of rotate. Now you have a real 2 deep up front, and obviously some of the pass rushers will add to that group too. And they got arguably 3 of those, so that kind of versatility and depth is going to be huge. One of the things that I think Flores brought from New England to Minnesota, and probably Miami before that, was that, Bill Belichick used to rotate his defensive linemen early in games. You'd see it, especially in hot weather games or playoff games. And basically the idea is that you rotate early so that you keep your starters in there for the fourth quarter in those key situations and whatnot. And, you'd rather give a reserve guy some first quarter snaps or second quarter snaps than maybe third or fourth. So I think that's also part of their thinking there.
Yeah. One last thing on this. At my previous experience in South Dakota State covering them, one of the big talkers was why they don't have a big sack guy. Like, they never had anybody who had like double-digit sacks in a season. And I remember talking to the coaches about it and being like, so, the first thing I mentioned is a sack's like a 99th percentile outcome, right? Like, that's the best possible outcome you can get during a play. The other part of it is too, they're like, we rotate about 8 to 10 guys on our defensive line all the time. And we just mix them in because we want guys fresh. We want guys explosive, and teams, especially at the FCS level, they don't have that depth to keep up. So if we have guys coming in waves, we're going to get more pressure on the quarterback, and it's going to make the rest of the defense better. I think that's what the Vikings are trying to do right now, where they don't have, an Aaron Donald or like to go way back for Vikings fans, a John Randall, but they have a lot of very solid defensive linemen who can do their job and kind of mix in and get that push.
And that's been a theme of the offseason. Not only this draft obviously afforded a lot of, there was a lot of talent to be had at all of the defensive line positions, the outside, 9 technique rusher, the big nose tackles, and everything in between, I think was pretty well stocked this year. Even the stand-up rushers who are more the linebacker types, like Jahad Campbell or Jalen Walker or something. So really I would say like the the on the line talent was really strong this year. And who won the Super Bowl? The Eagles. And how did they do it? They rotated defensive linemen and brought them in waves. And it's hard on a 53-man roster to have such strong depth up front. But I always say if I was an NFL GM, I would be drafting probably one D lineman, one DB, and one offensive lineman almost every single year, assuming I didn't have only 3 picks, right?
Yeah.
Just because you can never have enough of them, and you're always seemingly in need of that extra one. Your 5th D lineman is going to play as much as your 4th receiver, let's say. So I mean, it makes sense that would be a position that teams want to attack, and there's a proven history of success with it too.
So I'm going to lump in the 6th round picks together here for this last question. Kobe King and Gavin Bartholomew. King, a linebacker out of Penn State. Bartholomew, a tight end out of Pittsburgh, who's got the Jared Allen racing stripes mullet. So he's got that going for him at least. Yeah. Other than hairstyles, like what do these guys do for you? Do they bring anything to the Vikings? Is this kind of a diamond in the rough situation? What do you know about these guys?
Yeah, no, King was an interesting player for Penn State. I mean, I felt like he was this sort of rocked up, solid, physical guy who, almost like a boxer out there. You'd see him just slugging around for 4 quarters, and it looked the same in the first quarter as it did in the 4th. So, just a real highly active, rugged, tough, strong guy. A little bit on the smaller side. Obviously I think they've had some success the last couple of years with the linebackers with the less than ideal measurables and all that, but I would say he was probably fast enough at the college level. Is that going to work at the NFL level? We'll see. It's borderline, but I think he's got the kind of football character and enough of a skill set again that at worst, kind of reminds me a little bit of Kentrell Brothers, who they drafted, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or something.
Yeah.
But, Kentrell played for 4 years on coverage units and sparingly on defense and ended up being a decent player for them. Not a great player, but probably commensurate with where he was taken. And I would say that's, Kobe King was sort of that early day 3 target, I would say, who was probably a decent value where they got him, so that I think that pick can work. I just don't know if he has quite the range or the size to be a special player, but I think he can definitely be a very solid one, a respectable one. Gavin Bartholomew's a kind of an interesting guy who was a real steady pass catcher for 4 years, was basically starting as a freshman. Got good length, I would say, and his speed was even a little better than I expected. Doesn't, I would say he's an efficient mover, but I wouldn't say that he's, I don't know. You watch him on tape, you never thought, okay, this guy can run, right? So I was happy that he tested fairly well. Just the thing that really nicked him was the arm length measurement at the combine. I know it was, I believe he had a remeasurement at his pro day that showed a little bit of a difference, but the kind of the smaller frame, he's probably going to be a detached guy. His blocking is okay, fine, doable, functional. It's acceptable. I think he's got to work from angles as opposed to more inline stuff. So more of those kind of wham blocks from the flanks and things like that. And but yeah, he's a little bit light, and whether that will succeed at the NFL level beyond, maybe a number 2 or 3 role remains to be seen. But, get really solid player. I mean, it just felt like his big play opportunities kind of dried up a little bit, and he became more of the third down guy. Again, we've also seen Sam Laporta, and Colston Loveland get hindered by bad quarterback play or limited quarterback play, to where, you kind of wonder, does it translate to their skills really? But yeah, I mean, good quarterbacks will find these guys. So, with Bartholomew, I think he looked a little stronger when the quarterback play was better before Eli Holstein got hurt. So I would say that it's, he's probably like Gunnar Helm a little bit from Texas in that the workouts didn't do him any favors, and the tape was very solid and reliable, but they're not players that you're going to go crazy about. You have to kind of see it first.
And he's stepping into a big role for the Vikings because the Vikings had, according to Kevin O'Connell, the best third tight end in the National Football League. I don't know what that gets you, but yeah, Jacksonville, huge
special
haul,
mention on this show. Yeah,
exactly. All right, that is the Vikings draft class, but I need to ask you one more, and it's about a 2024 pick. Of course, that is JJ McCarthy.
Yeah.
A lot of talk about him. Aaron Rodgers calling the Vikings like, hey, I want to play for you. The Vikings said, nah. What are you high on JJ McCarthy? Are the Vikings crazy for starting him? Because, some of the podcasts I listen to are just like, why you can't start JJ McCarthy? There's no way. And like, there's no way that there is an outcome where he succeeds. So, like, can he lead this team where he wants it to go? Or like, what do you think about JJ McCarthy as an NFL prospect?
Yeah, no, I mean, I felt like I remember talking to somebody up there. I want to say like 2-3 days before he got hurt. And I said, how's JJ looking? They said, he's coming. Like, he's making his move. He was just, according to the people I talked to, I mean, again, I'm not up there on a daily basis for camp or anything, but it sounded like he was starting to settle in. There were some early rocky moments in the off season, but he kept stacking good days together. And so, it almost felt like, boy, there might've been a decision to make at some point. I mean, Sam obviously led him to a lot of wins last year, but I think they wouldn't have hesitated to make a switch if they felt like JJ was progressing, a healthy JJ, had he not gotten hurt. And would have been open to doing that had they felt the need. So, yeah, I mean, I don't sense that worry from them. Of course, they're going to look into an option like Aaron Rodgers. Like, it wasn't probably the plan that they came into the offseason with, but given Kevin and obviously knowing Aaron a little bit too, I would think they would have had conversations and at least fleshed it out and sort of figured out what the possibilities were of a union there, but wasn't meant to be. And I think, Kevin at the end of the day just realized, I don't want to undermine my kid, right? I don't want to take away from JJ his opportunity and have to make him wait another year. There's probably going to be some rough moments. He was not your typical top 10 quarterback prospect in the draft. But I feel like we've had several of those in recent years, and some of them worked out quite well. And, he's in his own category to a certain degree. He's an above average athlete. I think he throws the ball pretty nicely. He's obviously got some intelligence and creative ability. I think he's selfless to the point of understanding that, he's got to earn his opportunities and his role, meaning, vertical shots and some of the hero balls that Sam got at times. He's got to work up to that level. But I would say that the play could end up being a little steadier, even take into consideration the stretch where Darnold played really well. I thought it had a near MVP level for a little bit of the season there. But man, I mean, even if they're starting a couple steps back from where they were at the beginning of last year, I don't see any reason that by the end of the season, he can't progress to a place where they're really comfortable with him and that they feel pretty good about his ability to be the, if not the centerpiece, I mean, certainly the glue that holds this whole offense together.
And there's two things that I'm liking right now when it comes to McCarthy is one, there's just a steady drumbeat of good news with him. Like, it's, if you talk to a player, if you talk to a coach, like, and I mean, what are they going to say? Like, oh, this guy's terrible. We should have signed Aaron Rodgers. Like, what are we doing here, KOC?
Right.
No, I mean, you're hearing good things just on a constant basis of, he's on the right track. He throws the ball well. He's making good decisions. And like you said, there is going to be growing pains because he's a first-year quarterback. I am reluctant when it comes to the whole, well, he's just going to automatically fail. Like, what are the Vikings doing? I think
Sure.
Chase Daniel had a tweet that said, they're really going to let 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns walk out the door. I'm like, 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. 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 Like, 4,000 yards and 30 Well, they did the year before with Kirk Cousins, and they turned
Right.
out okay with Sam Darnold. Like when Sam Darnold threw that game-winning touchdown against the Seahawks and then beat the Packers the next week, he was on track to get like a $60 million contract.
Sure was.
Maybe not even that much, but I mean, it was going to be up there. I mean, Kevin O'Connell knows what he's doing. And I think if he felt like McCarthy wasn't progressing, he gives Rodgers the phone call, he gives him the thumbs up, and he brings him in by now. I think it's going to be it's going to be fun. Like, you know, I can't remember probably what Bridgewater in 2014, the last time you had a young quarterback and you're like, okay, you know, you take the new car for the test drive, right? You whip it around the corners or whatever. Like that's what this is. It's like we're jumping into the car, we're flooring the gas and seeing how she runs.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, you know, they could have franchised him too. You know, I mean, they could have just had him on the 1-year deal if they felt like, yeah, it's just one more. They had their opportunity to slam the door shut before Sam got out. And they just said, no, we think this is going to be the right play here. And yeah, you get the extra year with a first round pick to play with, but his injury last year essentially took that away. So the clock is ticking. You know, you've got to find out that fifth year option happens after not this coming season, but the next season. So, you know, think about where the Colts are with Anthony Richardson heading into year 3. You know, I mean, like you want as much data as possible to find out if he's your guy. That's really the question they're trying to find out. And I'll just pass on a story of a guy that I talked to at Michigan, and he said, you know, when he first got in here, was throwing the ball, we're all kind of wondering, you know, where's this magic? You know, where's the, and then he said you could just sort of see the light go on with him, and he was winning people over on a daily basis. And, you know, he's a great teammate. Like he cares as much about the seventh receiver on the depth chart as he does his starting left tackle, and, you know, all these different things. So, you know, his intangibles, I think, are going to carry him through the tough times. Not to say that Sam didn't have intangibles that were positives or anything. I'm just saying, I think he's sort of built from a different cloth, and everyone who's been around him, you know, just sort of swears by him. I think if Harbaugh took a job where he didn't have a Justin Herbert in place, he would have done whatever he could have done to get JJ. You know, I mean, he put his word on him and said, I think he's going to be a tremendous NFL quarterback. And yeah, some people roll their eyes at what Jim says, but I think he truly meant it. You know, even if they didn't give him 40 throws a game at Michigan, why would you? You have an amazing backfield, incredible run blocking O-line. Do it makes, you know, the strength of the team at that point was their run game. So I never bought into that thinking of, well, Jim doesn't trust him. He did on the last drive in the Rose Bowl. You know, he did in those crucial gotta have it situations. And JJ held up pretty well and acquitted himself well. And that's why he was a high draft pick. And that's why he's going to, I think, make a terrific pairing with Jefferson and all these guys and be a very good quarterback. I don't know if he'll ever be a star, but I think he'll be really good.
It's, you know, it's kind of like Jim Harbaugh sitting on the sideline like, man, I know we ran for like 250 yards today, but I got to get JJ some more reps.
Run plays. Is that enough?
Should I don't know.
You know, by that point they were up 35 nothing
improves.
Yeah, I mean, I never quite understood the complaints about that. I mean, to a degree I did, but when you saw him throw, he threw well.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll have that to look forward to. Also, you're cranking out plenty of work at NFL.com these days. What do you got going on? You said things are slowing down for you a little bit right now, but you got something in the hopper right now?
Yeah, no, I'm working on, I've got toughest and easiest schedules once we know the full slate. Now, I've been doing a little work, you know, to figure out who's got the tough road schedules, who's got the tough home games, you know, who's got the easier slates and all that. So I'll have a couple pieces next week with the schedule release, and it's a big week for the NFL. They've stretched it out. They've covered more of the NFL calendar, or the sporting calendar for that matter, with yet another event. So we'll try to milk it for everything we can, you know.
And of course, the Vikings wind up with two. Well, the rumor is right now, and it's starting to gain steam. The Vikings will have 2 overseas games next year, with one, I think it was Pittsburgh and Ireland, which there was a rumor that it was going to be Pittsburgh and Green Bay, but now they changed it to Minnesota. And I wonder if they know something that could happen because Pittsburgh's supposed to go to Green Bay next year. I'm not saying, I'm just saying. So
I know nothing. I truly don't.
Yes.
I do get the schedules a little bit ahead of time, so I will say that I do it, but I have not yet received them. So even if I did, I'd get fired if I told you anything on it. So I can't confirm or deny anything you're saying right now.
Eric, change the title of the podcast. Eric drops entire Vikings 2025 schedule right here, Viking Age exclusive.
I think that show might be up for an hour, and I'd be getting a call from my bosses saying, "All right, well, we've had fun with you, but today's your last day."
Roger Goodell's just going to show up right at your door like, what you doing, Eric?
He'd send somebody. You know Roger would send his best. You know?
Yes, exactly. Two dudes in men in black suits with a little like but yeah, you're over at NFL.com. Of course, we got stuff going on at the Viking Age right now. I talked about, the overseas games rumors. Adam, my usual co-host, he's talking about that. We got Colin Cowherd crashing out on JJ McCarthy. And I don't know if you saw this one, Eric. Some dudes online, they decided to make an AI like offensive lineman out of Idaho State named Tug Buck. So this dude is like, he's got long hair. He's got the handlebar mustache. He's got a shoulder sleeve of Kid Rock.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah. And everybody like thought it was real. So that, like the Vikings had just signed this like Busch Light chugging, machine to go play guard, but it's
Cro-Magnon of guard, right? Exactly.
Yes. So if you haven't seen it, you can go check it out at the Viking Age as well.
I will.
I'm over at the Fansided Regional Betting Network. I write about the Lions, Packers, and Bears over there, so you can catch up on them ahead of the draft. And just very quick PSA. I do write Packer material, and it is for a Packer audience. So if you read it, just know that's not what I think about the Vikings. It's just what Packer fans may think or want to hear.
Right.
Some people went on the internet last week and they had questions about my fandom as a Vikings fan and whatever. Just I get paid money to write for this Packer website. So if you were wondering or saw the article.
Yeah, hey, those paychecks are unbiased, baby. That's all I have to say,
Absolutely. And of course, we got baseball and basketball stuff over there right now. So go ahead, check it out. And then, of course, I got my Viking stuff at Zone Coverage with an article dropping on Saturday. So Eric, thank you for having me. Thank you for coming on the Viking Age podcast. I am Chris Shad at The Real Chris Shad. We do this every week right here on the Viking Age YouTube channel or in podcast form on Apple and Spotify the very next day. So however you consume us, like, comment, share, and subscribe so you never miss a new episode and we can spread the word to the masses. For Eric Edholm, I am Chris Shad. This has been the Viking Age podcast.